Needless to say, because we all already know, Elder Scrolls 6 is completely cooked. Fallout 5 is going to be a disaster, and Bethesda in general is complete shit at this point. And now, a developer has come out and said how disappointed and bad he thinks the Elder Scrolls 6 situation is. Which I would honestly not say is even news at this point, because unironically, this has already happened like 2 or maybe 3 times when an ex-Bethesda developer employee is speaking out about the absolute ginormous issues that Elder Scrolls 6 is currently in, or Bethesda is suffering in general. Like, there is no world where this works out. There is no world where Bethesda makes a good game in the next 20 years. The best that we can hope, if you're a true Bethesda fan, is that Todd Howard gets fired, Bethesda gets sold for spare parts, Fallout 5 gets cancelled, Elder Scrolls 6 gets cancelled, Fallout 76 gets deleted from existence and hopefully my mind, because that is just disappointing, and some other company just makes this because that's better than what we are getting in alternative. This is just sad.
The Elder Scrolls 6 might disappoint the fans, former Bethesda designer says. And this former Bethesda designer is actually Bruce Nesmith, who is the lead designer behind Skyrim. So it's not like this just random designer and such. Nesmith over the years has talked about Bethesda's culture, how it has changed.
I know this guy. Yeah, we have seen him talk about this stuff. He is not a fan, honestly.
He's also given a number of excuses about why Bethesda hasn't really adapted beyond Skyrim, and also of why, developers like Larian, who have really pushed the RPG genre forward, well, why Bethesda can't do that is just because they're not really making those type of games. They're trying to make a game for everybody. Well, Larian gives people tons of choices and stuff. Bethesda can't do that. It's just stuff that doesn't really make sense.
This is stupid. Baldur's Gate 3 is for everybody. It is extremely streamlined D&D stuff with a bunch of options. If there's any game that's for everybody, that's probably Baldur's Gate 3, if we're being honest. The bar to entry into that it doesn't exist.
When you really start to think about it, and it sounds more like excuses. And all of that is extremely alarming about how Bethesda, the complacency with their design, and how Skyrim really is their basic formula nowadays. You see that with Fallout, you see that with Starfield, and it is concerning, and it's something that a lot of developers, a lot of former Bethesda developers have acknowledged. I think it will always be fascinating when we talk about Skyrim's legacy, because for the masses, it's considered one of the greatest.
So this intro is just phenomenal, okay? Making Skyrim, are you awoke? Intros is gonna be a never-ending treat.
Games of all time. But if you talk to long-time die-hard Elder Scrolls fans, they a lot of them view it as a turning point for the worse for the franchise.
True.
Because it went a more casual direction.
A sea as deep as a puddle, okay? I will say this, okay? I am unbiased, as you all know, obviously, even though my Bethesda hate sees no bounds or limits. Skyrim wasn't the best game in my opinion, but I still spent 70 hours in it or something like that. A lot. I spent a lot of time playing Skyrim. I was not particularly a super big fan. A lot of the things about the game I did not personally like that super much, but it was fun. It was something that got my attention for a long time. Even if I didn't personally think it was the greatest thing ever. And that's a good game, honestly. That's a good game. A game that you personally don't think is that great, but you still end up playing, tens of hours. That is a game that did something right. Even though the criticisms of Skyrim are very on point, the story's shit, the story's stupid, it makes no sense, and it's boring, and it's dull, and it's predictable. And the fact that the world has no depth. But it is a fun world. It is a place that you want to explore and see what's behind the corner.
And stripped away a lot of the complexity and a lot of the beloved lore that really made this franchise what it was. It's very similar to how Fallout fans feel about Fallout 4. It's just one of those criticisms that has followed Bethesda. Now, when Nesmith says the Elder Scrolls 6 might disappoint the fans, again, he just brings up the fact of it's been so long that making a new entry like this, if it's not drastically different than Skyrim, which it doesn't sound like it will be, it's going to not be well.
Why would it be different than Skyrim? Starfield is a game in space, and it was literally a carbon copy of Skyrim. For God's sakes, we literally had dragon shouts in space. Bethesda couldn't even create anything unique with that. In fact, they made it first, which is very impressive, to be completely honest. How the hell do you take a concept that you already have and make it worse? Like, what is your secret at that point?
Received, or as well as received as it could have been. And I think that all of this just adds up. It is extremely alarming, and it's not like Nesmith is the only developer saying similar remarks, because we heard this just a couple of days ago coming from a former Bethesda lead artist, Nate Perkypile. And he said that the Elder Scrolls 6 along with Fallout 5 are no-win situations. And he specifically said that this factored into why he left the company recently. And it was because Skyrim being one of the top 10 games of all time, how do you beat that? And he noted that
True, but again, it's like, no one's asking you really to kind of beat Starfield, technically. But they're asking you to not make a shittier version of the game. Everyone knows that the hype is really hard to beat, honestly. The hype is unbeatable, technically. But just make a good game. People are not worried that you're not going to beat the hype of Skyrim. People are worried that your game is going to be shit.
They can't just meet expectations. It wouldn't be enough for the developer. And that pressure has been brought on because of the lengthy gap between entries. This is a mistake that Bethesda made. This is something that Todd Howard even himself has acknowledged. There shouldn't have been such a long gap between entries. And who knows, we could be waiting until 2028 for the Elder Scrolls 6. It doesn't seem like the development is too far in right now. It does feel like it's still a couple of years away. But even, Nate Perkypile here and Bruce Nesmith, two key figures in Bethesda's long and lengthy history, they are not the only developers, because yet another one of the former developers that was really there in the earliest days, Kurt Coleman, says he's highly skeptical about the Elder Scrolls 6. This was just last summer, July 2025. They're making something different than I would have done. Now, Kurt Coleman, like I said, he's been there since the earliest days. He played an integral role with shaping this franchise for what it is. But to really understand his important contributions to this franchise, you have to look to what Michael Kirkbride has said about him. And if you're not aware who Michael Kirkbride is, he played a very important role with shaping the lore of the Elder Scrolls franchise. His contributions to Redguard, Oblivion...
And now the Daedra are officially gay. By the way, if you do not pay attention to Elder Scrolls Online, which is canonical, I'm pretty sure, then you do not know that the Daedra, the Aedra, all of the gods are trans now. I'm not joking. I'm not. You can literally Google that. Yeah. I mean, what is the point of the fucking lore at this point, even? It's just a giant virtue signal.
Morrowind, these are games that really shape the lore of Tamriel, and a lot of that has to do with what Michael Kirkbride cooked up. And I mean, we still have articles like this being written, why Morrowind's 36 Lessons of Vivek is the greatest piece of lore in RPG history. This is specifically what, Michael Kirkbride was behind this. And he's also been one of the main figures that also wrote Redguard's Pocket Guide to the Empire First Edition. So a very important figure, a very beloved figure, and it was very alarming a couple of years ago when Kurt Coleman left the company. Suddenly, he said this specifically about Coleman's departure on Reddit. Kurt was the best writer that the Elder Scrolls ever had. He was a torchbearer of keeping Tamriel's more unique qualities and ideas alive. No surprise, as he had came up with so many of them. His leaving will be to the creative detriment of 6. Such a massive mistake letting him go. And then he followed up in another post when somebody was bringing up Coleman's departure with
maybe he wasn't woke enough, okay? Maybe he was an evil chud. You never know these things. Chuds walk among us.
Gone, my faith in the Elder Scrolls 6 has cratered. Now, beyond Coleman's role on Skyrim, his work on the Elder Scrolls goes as far back as 1996 when he worked on Daggerfall as a junior designer. And then Coleman and Kirkbride made a pitch to Todd Howard for a Pirates on Mars game, in which Coleman had already written scores of notes, and that became Redguard. And Todd Howard, Coleman, and Kirkbride were the trio of writers on that game. Then they moved on, eventually working on Morrowind, in which Coleman was heavily involved in its earliest writing and design, working on the game's story and its essential game systems. He left for a period of time, but in 2003, Coleman was...
God, what a fucking beautiful city, though. What an absolute beaut.
Period of time, but in 2003, Coleman was convinced by Todd to come back and work on the development of Oblivion, for which Coleman was chiefly responsible for the game's main questline. And he took a more prominent role as the lead designer on the Knights of the Nine download before doing quest design for Shivering Isles. So hopefully this puts a little bit more into perspective why Kirkbride is so down on the Elder Scrolls 6, as well as why Coleman's departure from Bethesda is just such a huge loss for this game. So you can understand why longtime Elder Scrolls fans have been extremely nervous, especially after Kirkbride made these remarks and what Coleman has said and other developers over the years about the Elder Scrolls 6. Well, Coleman actually opened up recently in another interview, this time with PC Gamer, and he had a lot more to say about the dysfunction and chaos happening behind the scenes at Bethesda Game Studios, and it really sets an alarming picture about where the Elder Scrolls 6 may be headed. So this is an article coming from PC Gamer, and it's titled Bethesda's former Elder Scrolls lore master and why he left, Starfield's communication breakdowns, and how he wanted the Elder Scrolls 6 to be the Empire Strikes Back. It was almost certainly time for change. Now this article, it starts off talking about why he left the company, how he's at a Tencent-owned studio Lightspeed LA now, and he mentions how some of the problems, some of the dysfunction happening behind the scenes were an inevitable result of Bethesda's boom years with hundreds of developers across multiple...
Wait, who the hell plays this game like this? One hand magic blasting fire and the other acts like, really?
Studios making Starfield, communication sometimes broke down and developers felt disconnected from senior management, Coleman says. But there's another reason why he left, and it's linked to a promise Todd Howard made to him about the Elder Scrolls 6, a promise he says that was never fulfilled. And we'll get to that in a second. But he talks about, first, the culture, how Bethesda has changed. And a lot of this is a given. When you're going from a developer of just dozens upon dozens of developers to hundreds, things change. The order of command changes. Because once upon a time, you were in a studio. You could go up to Todd Howard and bring him an idea. Michael Kirkbride himself is actually...
Who is this? Christine Meister, 20 years. Senior character artist, Bethesda Game Studios, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Blades.
Idea. Michael Kirkbride himself has actually talked about that. Some of the weirdest qualities, some of the weirdest beloved things about the Elder Scrolls only happened because Kirkbride was able to go up to Todd Howard and get him to convince him into it. Nowadays, though, that doesn't happen. A lot of these fun ideas have to go up a totem pole of management. It goes to one manager, goes to another, and it probably doesn't even ever see Todd Howard.
This is actually completely true. This is literally true. Everyone is in typical modern day companies. Everyone is just interested being the good guy, smart guy. So they're also interested in keeping you down to a degree. So if someone is capable of, making you not give Todd a good idea because that good idea is probably gonna detriment his job position, which it probably won't, to be honest. They're going to do that. They're going to prevent you.
That really does say a lot about the concerning qualities of this gaming industry and how a lot of studios...
Also, boys, like the video. It takes less than a second. Maybe subscribe. Also takes less than a second. Thank you for everyone who supports the channel by doing it. I greatly appreciate it, and it does make a huge difference. And if you think this stuff is important, then definitely like and subscribe right now. Takes less than a second. Thank you. Thank you sincerely.
Have really hurt themselves by growing to a point in which they're just a shell of themselves. Over the 2-decade second run, Bethesda ballooned and its culture changed, he says, particularly after 2011's Skyrim, which again, we all know that has shaped Bethesda for what they are in these modern times. In the early days, it was a close group of developers, including Todd, in a basement office, making decisions and eating in the canteen together, he says. By the time Starfield shipped in 2023, it's 4 remote studios all working together on a game. When you get to that size, you can't have people just popping. This is exactly what I was hitting home on. Just popping into Todd Howard's office to chat about a design point. He's not having lunch with everybody. It's very difficult when it's 400 people, 4 studios, big business, and Microsoft is now involved. And also on the Todd Howard note, he has his hands in so many different things. He was working with Machine Games on Indiana Jones. He's working on the TV show with Fallout.
Failed. Anything else, Todd, you want to destroy with your own 2 hands?
He's still contributing to Fallout 76 and all these other remasters and other things going on. He has his head, and he barely has his time to just concentrate.
He has his head is a very apt way of saying that. Like, I guess he exists.
On the Elder Scrolls 6 these days. He just has so much going on, and it creates problems. And we've heard about these problems over the years with Bethesda's management, and how a lot of the things that happen at Bethesda still have to go by Todd, and it can take a while for that to happen. Now, science brought problems. Decisions that on Oblivion would have been made on the spot after a face-to-face conversation were instead filtered through layers of management. Exactly. It's not like this is just a sole thing that's happened with Bethesda. Many other developers have been hit by this. This is just unfortunately a side effect when you grow to a point in which you have multiple offices worldwide, even operating at different times. Sometimes developers couldn't even work out who had made those decisions, Coleman says. He also describes communication breakdowns during Starfield's development, where teams didn't understand what they were supposed to be doing. Or, there would be people talking to the leads in one studio and getting an answer, and people talking to the leads in the other studio and getting maybe a different answer. And this reminds me of some of the reporting that came out about Fallout 76, in which there was friction between the Austin studio and the Maryland. And when you have two different studios trying to figure things out, there could be massive headaches. And when you don't have strong leadership, that's another problem that needs to be considered with this. And again, when you have a key figure like Todd Howard, and he has his hand in so many different pots, that creates problems when he can't just concentrate on that one specific game. We know Todd isn't. He's a very busy man. Now, Coleman continues, and he specifically says Todd's a very good project lead, and fundamentally, I think he's a designer at heart, and he's good at it.
Is he a very good project lead considering this garbage seems to happen? I doubt it.
Obviously, if you look back at the games. But over time, as he got busier and every part of this larger and larger organization wanted him to do stuff for their project, he would get pulled away. Howard made good decisions, Coleman says, so when he wasn't around, games suffered. Sometimes choices made in Howard's absence needed undoing later. And again, that's not good for a work environment. And long term, I mean, if you're asking why these games take so long, it does sound like this is a contribution, a contributing factor. Now, the way decisions were made wasn't the only problem for Coleman. As Bethesda grew, senior developers became more managerial and less hands-on. Skyrim's leads, Coleman among them, were also making the game directly, for example, writing and building quests. But by Starfield, the leads overseen by Howard included the heads of entire studios. It felt more bureaucratic, he says. The expectation was your job can't be also making content if you're actually managing that scope of the project. And that just more problems, more dysfunction that it's been somewhat known about the Elder Scrolls, this Elder Scrolls developer, but it just paints a very concerning picture for what's going on right now with TES6. Now, it does continue on. Coleman says that after Skyrim, Howard verbally promised him the lead design role on the Elder Scrolls 6, which was supposed to be the next project after Fallout 4. Of course, after Fallout 4, we didn't go to TES6. We made Fallout 76. And the revelation right here is that the Elder Scrolls 6 was in fact planned to be the game that was supposed to come after Fallout 4. Obviously, that's not how this worked out. We ended up getting Fallout 76, and we ended up getting Starfield, and now there's...
Yeah, it's pretty strange, honestly, because you'd expect them to release one game, aka Fallout, and then Skyrim-ish game, and, do that so people don't get bored, but they didn't. That was really strange. No one expected 76 to come out. Granted, no one wanted 76, but that's a different story, I guess, at this point.
Going to be a gap between maybe 17 years between Skyrim to TES6, which is just insane. But Coleman says that we made Fallout 76, and then we didn't make TES6. We made Starfield, which became this extremely long project compared to other ones. So from my point of view, I've been waiting like 11 years to be the lead on TES6. And he continues, I was obviously one of the old timers there and had a lot of experience. Bruce and I had been the co-leads on Skyrim. I think most people would call it a successful project. So I thought that it wasn't unreasonable for me to think that I could be a successful lead on TES6. It wasn't just my expectation. I had been told that that was going to happen. And they made the decision, no, you're not going to be the lead. And yeah, Coleman alongside Bruce Nesmith. I think a lot of people have...
Get him, dude.
have in their minds that Todd Howard is Mr. Bethesda. He is the only person, he's the guy who designed Skyrim, but that's just not how this works. Nesmith was the lead designer, Coleman was the co-lead designer. These are some of the most integral figures which shaped that game and made it what it was. And Todd Howard, I guess, decided not to go with him. They went with a different developer. And if you want to look at the resume, this is the individual that they went with.
Who was that they went with? Yeah.
Alan Nanes, he's also
Alan
another
Nanes,
long
he, him. Well, there you have the problem. He, him. Oh, you can't. Oh, no, you can't actually see he, him, okay? You can. Okay, good.
time developer at Bethesda. He joined the company in the Morrowind days. His notable contributions, as listed on his own LinkedIn profile.
Like, these contributions honestly mean nothing, depending on what he actually has done. For example, look at this. Here he has lead designer, nothing, lead designer, nothing. Role, Thieves Guild, City of Riften, so he was the lead designer on 2 specific things. Role, you see, when he has something that's actually worthwhile, he puts in what he, that he was the lead designer. This is the LinkedIn game, okay? LinkedIn is just who can get their internet peen bigger than anyone else. Effectively, LinkedIn just created finally the solution for all of these CEOs who are sad that they have money but they have no recognition. By the way, that's a real thing, because obviously all of those people think that they need to be famous. They deserve to be famous, in fact. There are podcasts where rich people, CEOs of companies, literally contact them and say, hey, I'm gonna pay you $50K if you put me on your podcast, because they want to be famous. And LinkedIn essentially just gave these fucking losers an outlet to try and become, well, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, podcasters, and, you know, all of these things, which is hilarious. So, LinkedIn has many problems, obviously, and above everything else, it's just about fucking ego, because you couldn't become a YouTuber, but you're a poor fucking multimillionaire CEO. Oh no, the horror, the sadness. Yeah, I know. Sad, isn't it?
Is that he was the lead designer on Broken Steel. I really like that. He was the he worked on the Thieves Guild, City of Riften for Skyrim, Fallout 4, Brotherhood of Steel, the Companions designer, Nuke World. He's the lead designer. A little less so. Did not really enjoy that at all.
Yeah, that was not.
And then
good.
More recently, Starfield. He was the lead Companions designer, which I think was one of the weakest aspects of Starfield. But he also worked on the Crimson Fleet and Neon, better aspects of Starfield. I think the most notable though is the fact that
Crimson Fleet sucks. Neon sucks.
His latest role was the creative lead on Starfield Shattered Space, and
that was
I think that is the worst
shit.
piece of content Bethesda has ever produced, and he was responsible for that.
He's right.
Now, it's important to understand that while I believe that, and maybe yourself, Bethesda feels differently, as evidenced by Emil Pagliarulo, who did a number of interviews at the time. This was controversial, and it was the fact that he was defending Starfield Shattered Space. He was saying that I'm also very proud of Shattered Space. We all are. It's alarming. This is an alarming remark.
None of these people are good developers. None of these people have potential. Nothing but that Bethesda does make sense nowadays. And needless to say, Elder Scrolls 6, even without the leaks, even without the people from Bethesda saying these bad things, we already know from what we saw Bethesda already achieve in the past decade or two that there's not really any chance that Elder Scrolls 6 magically is just not gonna be garbage. That is sadly not happening. Anyway, that was Legacy Kill HD 10 out of 10. Bye!